Hello and welcome to the podcast. Every moment is sacred, where we interweave meditation and healing into everyday life. I am your host, Rain Elizabeth Stickney. Now, let us begin. Today's guest is Martha Alter Hines. Martha is a mother, author, healer, and an astrologer. She holds a master's degree in social work and has 20 years experience as a clinical social worker, psychotherapist, and body worker. Her favorite form of astrology is evolutionary astrology, and she bridges her trauma-informed background with this astrological knowledge. Martha is a pleasure to talk with. You'll find our conversation fluid and spacious. She has a deep understanding of ourselves as beings in the cosmos, earth, divine, heart, mind, and so much more. Born in Thailand and growing up in Bangladesh, Pakistan, Kenya, and the United States has given Martha a passion for alleviating the suffering of our world. Dedicated to service, Martha helps each of us thrive and supports us in coming back to the infinite wisdom and healing that is our natural state of being. A gentle warning, Martha does refer to a moment in history called partition in 1947. This is when India and Pakistan divided, and there was murder that was happening at that time, and she describes how partition affected her family. So if this kind of historical moment is not right for you, perhaps you are a young listener or you are an adult who is looking after the young audience of this podcast, make your best decision about whether or not partition is a historical moment just right for you to learn a little bit about. Martha has a free gift. She is offering all of you the cosmic wisdom highlights of 2024. This is a free mini ebook where she describes 3 of the top astrological themes of 2024. When you receive this gift, you will learn the 3 top themes that are highlighted in the cosmos in 2024. And receive the guidance on how these themes can support healing and growth in your life as well as in the world. You will also gain clarity in what areas of your astrology chart might be particularly emphasized by each of these themes in 2024 and beyond. Go to the show notes to find the link to receive this wonderful gift. You will also see in the show notes various ways of contacting Martha. Her website is livingtheonelight.com. She can be found on Facebook at Living the One Light. She also has a YouTube channel, a teachable site, and you can email her livingtheonelight@gmail.com. Martha is a blessing in this world, and I am so grateful that she joined me on this podcast and is sharing with you her version of how every moment is sacred, which truly resides in love. Before we get to the conversation, I welcome you to follow, subscribe, rate, review, share this podcast in a way that feels right to you. Your feedback is always welcome. Please email me healing@rainelizabeth.org. Now, without further ado, Please enjoy the show and welcome Martha Alter Hines. Hey, Martha. It's so good to have had a chance to chat with you already before pressing record and just to dive into conversation, dive a little deeper and see where the universe takes us.
Awesome. Happy to be here.
Thank you for being here. I like to ask people what they're grateful for. I find gratitude to be a wonderful practice. And what are you grateful for today?
I'm grateful for so many things. The immediate thing coming to me is cuteness.
Oh,
I'm thinking of my children, my 2 kids and my 3 cats, and I feel how lucky I am that I have them, first of all. And I've just been noticing they were staying with their dad for a few weeks. I typically they're with me most of the time, and I haven't had a break in quite a while. And then they were with their dad because it's the summertime now. So they're with their dad for a couple of weeks, and they came back, and I noticed how much cuteness infused my life all of a sudden, and how much joy I feel in my body and in my heart. And
mm,
just
mm.
very
That is
great.
so sweet. I'm so glad that they have returned and you get to find cuteness. It's such a gift that children offer.
Yeah, even when, it's frustrating and difficult and overwhelming and
Hmm. Hmm.
still very cute.
What are your favorite parenting hacks for when parenting is overwhelming and children's behavior is challenging? What do you like to do as a mom?
That's a great question. I think my perspective on parenting is a little bit, the word is not skewed. I have a certain perspective, I think, that's colored by the work I used to do, which was for a very long time, I was a clinical social worker in the child welfare system. So, I witnessed pretty horrific situations of child abuse and neglect and terror and what it is for children to truly be struggling and what a healthy child well-being really looks like and what it doesn't. And so I think because of that, I take things really lightly in my own
Mm,
life, in my own parenting. I mean, I really, really get it that I'm incredibly privileged in so many ways. And that even when I'm genuinely, truly overwhelmed and I feel like I'm going to have a nervous breakdown because parenting just gets you to that point, kind of, I think, inevitably, I still have this in the back of my mind, how lucky I am and how supported I am in even internally. And yeah, for some reason, just kind of, I think it's the gratitude thing, actually, in a certain
mhm,
way, just having this knowledge that ultimately things are okay
mhm,
in certain basic ways.
mhm.
I think that's probably the biggest thing that helps me. Yeah, and there's so many other things I could say, but that's probably my biggest honest answer.
I love that you mentioned internal support.
Mm,
Where do you find internal support? What does that mean to you?
yeah, again, I'm thinking of my old social work clients, who a lot of people have grown up with just like internal, well, trauma. And I'd say the biggest internal support I'm referring to is ultimately probably self-love, that
Mm,
I feel so lucky that I fundamentally love myself, and I fundamentally know that I'm a good parent, and I fundamentally know that I'm a good human, even if I'm not perfect. Even if I, do things I don't know that aren't perfect all the time. I feel so sad watching so many people, parents, people of all kinds, doubting themselves, having these really, really harsh voices, internal voices, and like there's often a default for people to feel really badly about themselves, and that's often coming from the inside out. I mean, it started from the outside in, but now it's like an internalized thing that's so heartbreaking to me. And we were kind of saying this before we started recording, that I feel like one of the biggest things I do even in my work now is witnessing the good in people and when I was in social work, I worked a lot with biological parents and also with foster parents. And I'd say 90% of any parent of any kind doubts themselves and doubts that they are a good parent a lot of the time. And so I think the biggest sentence I said to any and all parents is, "You're doing great." I mean, truly, because they were. I wouldn't lie. I mean, I would not say,
Mhm.
if they're hitting their child, I would not say you're doing great. But
Mhm.
but I would even then probably find lots of things they were doing really well. And
Mhm.
any of us who are trained as therapists, the strengths-based approach is typically the way to go. So
Mhm.
that's what I would build on. But even now, it's like I feel like one of the biggest things people need in our world is to be witnessed deeply, deeply on a soul level, witnessed
Mhm.
um, as perfect and beautiful and whole and complete, and
Mhm.
like the divine being or flower or sequoia or redwood or
Mhm.
whoever they are, right? The
Mhm. Mhm.
To be able to see that, witness it, be with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I imagine you bring this quality to your work these days and perhaps all time, really seeing that beauty in people who come to you for help and healing or however they're resonating with you. I imagine you see their flower nature.
Yeah, I do. Incredibly moving. 'Cause, yeah, every person has it. Yeah.
How do you do that? And what kind of work do you do in the world?
Great questions. Well, the what do I do in the world part, maybe I could answer first.
Mhm.
Uh, I do many things. So again, I was a clinical social worker, as a psychotherapist. And so I did that for most of 20 years. In the middle of that, for 5 years, I was also a massage therapist and an energy worker and all of that. And then in 2018, I was a supervisor in the child welfare system, and I had this really powerful spiritual experience. Basically, told me that I was going to need to leave social work and start channeling, and my work was going to need to become it was going to need to incorporate my spiritual self, as well as all of the other healing psychotherapy-ish skills that I had. And so that's a whole long story.
Mhm.
But that is what happened. A year later, I left social work, and oh, sorry, in 2018, I did start channeling, which I had never done before, and I channeled the first book in a series of 8 books that I'm channeling, called the Living the One Light series. And then in 2019, when I left my job, then I channeled the next 2 books in that series, called Gaia Speaks and The Cosmos Speaks. And those 3 books are essentially reminders to us that we are the light, we are the earth, we are the cosmos. And they're like guides for remembering, but they're pretty simple. And what the spirit world told me in 2018 was that when I started channeling, what they said, what you channel will become the platform for what we need you to do next. So that was kind of the first step, was I channeled these first 3 books in this series of 8. And then yeah, what has developed since then is a lot of different things, but I do a combination of one-on-one and small group and very, very large group healing spaces, essentially, where I, in various ways, hold this healing space for us to remember who we really are on the infinite levels of who we are. So, for example, something I talk a lot about in my work is that's somehow, it's feeling important to say. So there's so many directions I could go here, but this is what's coming up, I think might feel relevant for you or this conversation, is something the spirit world keeps reminding me of, that brings me back to, is that when we're holding space for healing in this moment, in the United States, European ish cultures ish I don't want to generalize, but anyway, in the culture I'm in, for sure, there's an emphasis on psychotherapeutic techniques that are of a particular set, right? So like typically in my training, for example, and in where I worked, the emphasis was on research. What's the word? Research-based?
Evidence-based.
Evidence-based. That's the word.
Mm-hmm.
Evidence-based therapeutic techniques, which primarily are focused on cognitive behavioral type of techniques.
Mm-hmm.
So that those techniques tend to focus on ourselves as beings of behavior, beings of the mind, and occasionally might acknowledge the body and might acknowledge the heart. But then it stops there. And maybe, if you want to be really sensitive to a client, you might acknowledge their spirit or their soul if that happens to be something they bring up, but you wouldn't typically go into that realm.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm thinking of at the nonprofit where I worked, where I was working with trauma,
Mm-hmm.
families in traumatic situations. Typically, I wouldn't be encouraged to bring in anything spiritual at all.
Right.
Which often is appropriate if the person is not spiritual. You shouldn't just like all of a sudden bring in spiritual things when that's not who they are. That I agree with that. At the same time, a lot of what I do now bridges this trauma-informed way of working that I do have with the reality that we are beings of our minds, we are beings of our hearts, we are beings of our bodies, we are beings of our soul, we are beings of the earth, we are beings of the cosmos, we're beings of infinity, we're beings of the divine. And I feel like in the last however many years, again, the culture at least I'm in has been so focused on the mind that it has really ostracized our other ways of knowing, our other ways of being, and our other ways of healing. And so this work that I do now is really trying to hold space for complete healing, holistic
Mm-hmm.
mind, body, spirit, soul, earth healing. And that that includes so many different things, but that's kind of the overarching umbrella. Yeah.
I hear the holistic approach and I feel wholeness as you're describing your work. And I imagine when people come to you, they get an opportunity to either celebrate their wholeness, maybe they already feel whole and they're drawn to working with you, or they get the opportunity to feel whole where they have not.
Yeah. And I would say it's more the second one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I always like to leave room for that part of humanity who already gets the beauty of who they are and who people are and what the universe is. And they are looking for others who also get that view.
That would be me. That would be, yes, that speaks to me.
I think that's part of our connection.
I appreciate that very good. Yes. When people are only focused on XYZ pain, I feel often not seen and not acknowledged. And so thank you for that. Yeah. Not that I don't have pain and not that I,
Sure.
Yeah.
It's part of the wholeness. I mean, if we all of a sudden don't have pain, where did it go? It's part of the human experience. A rock drops on a toe, or for me, I fall down the stairs and I break my toes. There is pain. It's okay. It's supposed to hurt. So when somebody comes to you and they might not be feeling whole, how do you keep an eye on their beauty and who they truly are? How do you do that in your work?
Yeah, I love that question. And I think it's probably a number of things that are really unconscious for me. But what comes up is I just feel it in my heart. That's it. I think at this point, I think I've honed it for so many years of sitting with people in such extreme pain and seeing how amazing they are. It's just like second nature, I think, at this point in a certain way. But I feel it in my heart. I feel this. I mean, I'm feeling it right now. Like I almost could cry. Like there's just this feeling of divine love, like the power of existence, the love of existence just pours through me. And that's just part of who I am as a person. But especially when I'm sitting with a client, that's often what will happen is this, just my heart becomes like, it's like its own muscle. I mean, it
Mm.
is, the heart is a muscle, that's true. But it's the energy of my heart becomes like this
Mm-hmm.
very strong conduit in a sense. And the love just starts pouring.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, it's this feeling of, if you want to use the word God or the divine, whatever word you want to use, it's like I have this feeling in myself as I'm with the person, as God could never not love you, right? And so, and not that I would say those words to them, but that's just the feeling in my body is like, wow,
Yeah.
yeah, like you're perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very maternal feeling, but not. Does that
Mm-hmm.
make sense?
Mm-hmm.
um
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's not even conscious, and it's not really a choice I make, it's just what happens.
Yeah. The isness of love.
And I've always felt that with all of my clients from very, 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 when I was
Mm-hmm.
22 and had my first social work clients, in inner city
Mm-hmm.
DC,
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
sitting there, just, yeah. And I think actually, honestly, it also comes from having the way I grew up. Probably I grew up in parts of the world where there's a lot of suffering, very intense suffering. And my stepmother was from Pakistan, very, very, very poor family in Pakistan. And so I grew up hearing her stories of her life, which were pretty horrible and
Mm.
sick, and I loved her so powerfully.
Mm.
So I think that's there in me too. It's just,
Mm. It sounds like you're speaking of the understanding of diversity of humanity and
yes.
how there's a real experience about poverty that is true of poverty. And to see it, to witness it, to hear about it, to be a part of that realm in our human family brings about compassion and empathy and understanding.
Yes. And also, I think one other element with her is that she was from a part of society that is very ostracized. So
Mm.
her family originally, this might get confusing anyway, if people don't
Mhm.
know the history of South Asia. So India used to, what is now Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India used to be all one country, right? And in 1947, they split into Pakistan and India. And that's called partition. And during that time, my family was living there, and it was horrific. It's like the
Mm.
most violent, people were murdered, slaughtered, millions and millions and millions of people were slaughtered in this partition time. So long story short, essentially my stepmother's family originally were Hindu, but they were very, very poor. And the part of India that became Pakistan was for Muslims, basically. And so anybody in that part, that land, who was Hindu was either slaughtered or they were forced to immigrate to what was becoming India or what was staying India. And so my stepmother's family was Hindu and was in the part of the land that was becoming Pakistan. So
Mm.
rather than get killed, they converted to Catholicism.
Oh.
So she was actually Catholic, which is a teeny tiny tiny minority. To be Christian in Pakistan is, I think, 1% of the population, but it's at least safe enough to not get killed compared
Wow.
with the Hindu there, right? But her family, when they were Hindu, was from the sweeper caste, so it was the lowest caste of the Hindu community.
Mm-hmm.
And so her family historically had been the lowest of the lowest of the lowest of society. And also her skin was very dark, which in lots of parts of the world, including in the Indian subcontinent, is looked down on in lots of ways. So she would say about herself some pretty disparaging things like, I'm black, which to her was not a good thing. And really painful to her to have dark skin. And I felt, so there was like this element of knowing her and loving her so deeply that was like I got it from day one, you know, even people who are seen by society as the lowest of the lowest of the low, or whether they see themselves that way, whatever it is, no, no, they are incredibly powerfully divine, right? Every single
Mm-hmm.
of us. So yeah, that's another element there, I think.
Mm. Yeah, so powerful, such a powerful element. And I hear that she is your stepmother. So when did you meet her? How old were you?
She was, yeah, so I met her when I was 7.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we lived, my long story, she was originally my ayah. So she was originally my nanny
Mm-hmm.
in Pakistan. And my dad basically had an affair with her. My parents were still married, had an affair with her for, I don't know, starting when, I don't know, whatever. There's kind of a span of years that are gray and question marks. But eventually my parents got divorced and my dad married my who my nanny, who then became my stepmom. But she and I were very, very close starting when I was 7. She was like, she was she was basically my mom. I mean, my mom is also my mom,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, my stepmom was who took care of me for lots
Yeah,
of my
it's possible to have many moms.
childhood. Yeah, definitely.
So if she saw herself in this disparaging way, I get that you did not see her in that way. How did you see her even as a child? What was your vision of your stepmom, your nanny who also became your stepmom?
Yeah, that's a really beautiful question. I could easily just start crying right now. So it's like I have to
Mm,
take some deep breaths. I've never thought of it that way. How did I see her? That's really beautiful. I don't know if any of this was conscious to me at the time, but I experienced her as the person caring for me, number one. I experienced her as unconditional love for me and just in life. She was an incredibly loving, generous person, very, very deeply wise. And she witnessed me, like she really could see who I was.
wow. So I imagine you felt seen by her. You
Hmm.
really felt understood by her.
Yeah, definitely.
Wow. I get chills as you move into this description
Mm.
of her. I feel my body responding to you.
Hmm. Yeah. And I know that I've known her for many lifetimes. I mean, that's another
Mhm.
element
Mhm.
of it too. It's
Mhm.
just very, very deep soul knowing.
I know that in India, it is common that there is a belief about reincarnation in different traditions, in Hinduism, but in other traditions as well. Are some of your spiritual beliefs influenced by the places you lived and influenced by the people who raised you?
I'm sure. I mean, I wasn't raised with any particular dogma, religious dogma. My dad's parents were both born and raised in India, and their parents, so both sets of my paternal great grandparents were missionaries in India, and they were Presbyterian missionaries. So certainly my family has a Christian heritage. I mean, obviously, but I wasn't raised particularly Christian. And my stepmom also was a huge influence in my life in terms of the diversity of spirituality. She was Catholic, and I did actually go to church with her a few times in Pakistan and in the United States, which is very interesting to have gone to a Catholic church in Pakistan.
Wow.
Wow. It's a lot like a mosque, actually. And I've been to mosque in Pakistan, and I've been to Hindu temples in the United States and probably in India, but I don't know. It's been a very long time. But my stepmother, like I said, her family was originally Hindu. So when she lived in the United States, most of her friends were Indian Hindus. So that influence was around me for sure. But again, nobody ever, I was not raised ever I was never told as a child or at any point in my life that I should believe any particular thing. But what I do find really fascinating is that at this point in my life, in my own personal spiritual experiences, what typically happens for me is at this point, for the last 10 years, I've had a prayer routine that I do every morning. And when I do this, practice for myself, it's not something I share with the world. It's just my own thing.
Mhm.
Um, I get, for the last 5 years, I've been getting taken out of the time-space continuum. Basically, I go through the atmosphere of the Earth, then I go through this solar system, then I go through this universe, then I go out of this universe and into this like infinite universal space. And
Mhm.
then I get taken out of all of the time, the whole time-space continuum, and then I get taken into the void.
Mhm.
And then it's in the void that I typically channel from, and I get shown a lot of things about the nature of existence in that space. So like the nature of what energy is and what vibration is, and how, everything is vibration, and how we come back into the radical balance and harmony of all things of the divine. A lot is shown to me in that void space. And what I think is so interesting, since that started happening for me, is the closest I've found in any spiritual tradition that I know about anywhere in the world. And of course, I'm sure there's plenty I don't know about. But the thing that has been an eerie match for what I personally experience is a lot of what is talked about in various Buddhist, Indian and Tibetan Buddhist traditions. And I'm not
Mm.
Buddhist,
Mhm.
and I have not been trained in Buddhism. My kid's dad was very involved in the Gelugpa version of Tibetan Buddhism, so I'm familiar with it, but I was not ever a practitioner of it. But it is eerily matching.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, so I do kind of wonder if I've gotten influenced without realizing it, or
Mhm.
I mean, again, I definitely know I've had many, many lifetimes in South Asia, and so I have
Mhm.
speculations about that. But yeah, and actually, one of the books I read 3 years ago, this book, you might even love this book. I don't know. Have you heard of
Ooh,
Women of Wisdom?
it looks familiar. I have not read it though.
It is an amazing book. And in there, it's a book basically talking about various Buddhist nuns,
Mm.
ancient Buddhist nuns who are actual, historical figures who had these ways of knowing that just came through them, were them, right? And this was a traditional way of being for women, men in that tradition for hundreds and hundreds of years. And again, in that book, I is part of where I realized, whoa, a lot of what I'm experiencing is so similar to what these Tibetan Buddhist nuns
Mhm.
experience. So what is going on? But what was also really fascinating about that is that the book talk that book and another scholarly book talk about a part of Pakistan that I traveled in a lot as a child, which is called the Swat Valley. In that Swat Valley, which is now highly patriarchal, you know, just it's part of Pakistan. Pakistan is exceedingly patriarchal.
Mm.
That part of the Swat Valley actually originally, well, it's a certain point in history, was a thriving locale for these Buddhist nuns, these women scholars of Buddhist ways of knowing. And I spent a lot of time there as a child, right? And I would never have guessed that history of that place. So I don't know. It's just,
Oh, what a connection.
yeah, really
Now,
interesting.
so here's another overlay. You and I were talking before we were recording, and so I know that you're an astrologer, and my mom was also an astrologer. And I know
Mm.
that there is something about, I forget the term right now, but it's astrology based on geography. So geographical astrology.
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
wondering if you've looked into that for yourself with this specific area of Pakistan.
I haven't looked at that. Actually, that's a great question. I should. I was actually looking at, I did an
Mhm.
cartography reading for somebody 2 days ago, 3 days ago.
Mhm.
Um, and so I was just, I've looked at the map for me, the world map with the astrology lines on it for me, previously plenty of times, but it had been a while. And so I was curious. And so I was looking at it, but I didn't hone in on that area. I should do that. That would be
Mm.
super interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, I I feel interest. I feel possibility and interest. Like, ooh, what is happening in that part of the world for you astrologically? And at the
Definitely.
moments when you were there, as well as in general.
Hmm. That's such a good question.
Yeah.
Now I'm intrigued.
Mm. I feel your lifetimes present. I also believe in reincarnation, and not to go too much into my own belief about that, but I'm feeling the resonance of, oh, I see your multiple lifetimes in this moment embodied in who
Hmm.
you are today.
Hmm. I feel that a lot, all the time, pretty much. Yes. And thank you for witnessing it.
You're
Yeah, I feel that
welcome.
in all of us, right? Yeah, 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 yeah. Hmm.
Thank you for showing yourself to me and revealing yourself to the world in so many different ways. So I can follow along with a lot of what you were talking about, like channeling, for example, terms of infinity and soul. And so I have a sense of what you're talking about, but just to define some terms, what does it mean for you to channel? You took us on a lovely vision of what it's like when you pray and you go beyond, but just breaking it down a little bit more, what does channeling mean to you?
Yeah. And I think it's so different for anybody. I think we all channel in certain ways without maybe even realizing that that could be a word that could be placed on something we do. For me, when I'm using that word, so in 2018, I had this experience where essentially a circle of eight beings came to me and told me, like I said before, that I was going to need to leave social work and that I needed to start channeling. And like I said, I had never channeled before. I had lots and lots and lots of very powerful spiritual experiences up to that point, but I had never channeled. And so for me, what then started to happen over the next few months was I would get the sense of a particular energetic or being that needed to speak through me. So I would just get this feeling like of a being like kind of behind me in this sense. And very, very beautiful feeling. I mean, always really, healing presence, powerful, really positive feeling. And then it's like I let the energy of that being just come through my body. And I would do this. I feel like when we do energy work, like Reiki, if anybody's familiar with Reiki, it's like we're channeling light, we're channeling healing. We're always doing that. If our cat or our dog or our child gets hurt and we hug them, right? I feel
Mm-hmm.
like we're channeling love.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the simplest way to say it. But then I feel like we can channel so many different things. We can channel love, we can channel light, we can channel healing energy. And then what I'm talking about is channeling words. So I would sit down, I would feel like this, especially in the beginning, what would happen is I would just get this feeling like this presence, like the words were just going to start flowing. And sometimes I wouldn't be in a position where I could type, like I'd be driving or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'd have to be like, hang on, I cannot type right now. And then I would get to, somewhere where I could actually type. And then I would just close my eyes and just let the words flow as though I would just let that being speak through me. Yeah. And for sure, when I've done that, it's, things come through that I would never have thought of ever as me, Martha, ever, ever, ever.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so these
Yeah.
words come and you speak them or you type them, but you get them out somehow.
Yeah.
So then they exist in this world. And how would you know when the channeling is done or that session is complete in whatever language you talk about?
It's kind of like an exhale, like
Mhm.
breathe in and then you breathe out and you just naturally know that the exhale is done and then you breathe back
Oh,
in, right?
that's so natural.
Yeah, it for me it's just there's no really thinking about it. It just
Mhm.
is.
Mhm.
Uh,
So it sounds like a process that you're very aligned with and a process that's very meaningful to you as well as to other people as you're sharing these gifts with the world. And it sounds like you have a resonance with, oh, okay, it's beginning. I'm channeling. Okay, there's the exhale. I'm now moving back into Martha's life or Martha's world. Not that you're not ever yourself, but I get that there's a little bit of a distinction between when you're channeling and when you're not channeling.
Definitely. Yeah. And I do channeling a lot in my work
Mm-hmm.
these
Mm-hmm.
days. So I hold healing sessions, circles with people pretty often, multiple times a month, and I channel in a lot of those. Yeah, it's very distinct. I mean, my voice doesn't change or anything. I don't change. I'm still me. I still remember everything,
Mm-hmm.
but it's very, very clear and distinct. And I can just get this. And sometimes, and I have a YouTube channel, right? And mostly it's just me, Martha, talking, but occasionally I just get this feeling like what's going to come through me, Martha, is not what actually needs to be said right now. I need to drop into the channeling mode, even in this video or something.
Mm-hmm.
And then what ends up coming through is, in almost every single time, just blows me away. I would never. I can give you an example.
Sure. Great.
So a few months ago, I think it was maybe February-ish of 2023, this year, me, Martha, the human, was very upset about certain things happening politically in the
Mm-hmm.
United States, and which I think a lot of people have been. And in particular, my undergraduate school, I went to New College in Florida for my undergraduate school, and that school has been in the news a lot lately because it was kind of a target school that was it was originally very liberal, very socially progressive, and academically very rigorous too. But long story short, essentially, the current government in Florida didn't like the fact that it was so liberal, so they have now installed a new leadership in that school, and taken away all anything focused on diversity or
Oh.
supporting people around any kind of social justice, anything. And they've installed sports teams instead. And they're basically trying to turn it from a liberal school into a very, very, very conservative school. So the human me was very upset.
Mm-hmm.
and I was doing a video on my YouTube channel about that moment astrologically, and I was just naming, I don't like to get really caught up in that kind of thing on my videos, but I was naming this is real, and a lot of us are upset about these things because they're tragic and they're violations of human rights in lots of ways. Anyway, on and on. So I was acknowledging it, but I could just feel it. Something needed to channel because there was a different perspective that was going to be like the human me was so caught up in the upsetness that I wasn't going to say anything probably that helpful to anybody because I was too upset.
Mm-hmm.
So I started channeling and in the video, and what came through was so helpful to me and hopefully to other people. But essentially what the spirit world said when I channeled was that we are all source. We are all returning to a remembering of ourselves as source. That is inevitable. That is just simply what's going to happen. It's, homeostasis is inevitable. So on this planet, there's a lot of struggle. There's a lot of sense of disconnect from ourselves as whole and ourselves as divine. And at the same time, that ultimate state of total balance and harmony is the state of life. That is the ultimate state of life. And so everything will return to that. It is ultimately already that. And so what they basically were guiding me and anyone listening to do, if it felt right, is to imagine the earth in a sling, like a baby sling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they were saying, people who are hurting so much and who are perpetuating this state of harm and hurt in all different kinds of ways, not just the Florida situation, but with war or with whatever in relationships, and all of us can be in that state sometimes where we get caught up in anger or whatever it is. That They said, imagine it's like you're holding a baby in a sling, and when babies fall asleep, some babies just fall immediately to sleep, just peacefully and easily,
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. But other babies, it's just natural to who they are that they actually, some babies need to cry louder and louder and louder
Mm-hmm.
as part of their own self-soothing or their way to fall asleep, right? So, like, we're both moms. I mean, it's it's like every baby is just different. And even if the baby wants to be held and bounced, part of what they might be also need, their body maybe needs to do, is to have a moment of like really expressing something, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then they fall asleep. So the spirit world was essentially equating that falling asleepness to the waking up process, in a sense. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we're all eventually going to relax into the arms of the divine and remember that we are the divine. That's just inevitable. And in that remembering process, some of us need to cry louder, which I don't know, that I could go in all different directions with that too. But essentially they're saying when people are creating so much hurt and it's even feeling like it's escalating, like getting worse and worse and worse, it's like a baby who just needs to cry it out before they fall
Mm-hmm.
asleep. But we all will remember that we are the divine. It might take lifetimes, but that
Mm-hmm.
is, it is happening, and it will happen.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's the kind of thing,
Yeah.
like, I would never, Martha, the human, would never have ever thought to say something like that. But in the channeling, it felt really true and really right, and certainly
Mm-hmm.
helpful to me to have that perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yes. What a great perspective. And I do resonate with that. I'm using the word resonate a lot in this conversation. But I do. And part of the work that I do with parents is teaching them how to be with their children when their children are upset and allowing there to be connection without stopping the emotion, because the feeling of the emotion is really important for the child or the human or the adult or whoever the person is. The emotion is healing to be felt. But if we have an emotion and we refuse to feel it, or we have a parent who helps us to stuff down our emotions, there's a function to that, but it's not healing. So I work with parents to help that connection to happen. And I'm thinking about the political scheme in our country and Florida and other places in the world. What a great challenge it is sometimes to hold these situations with love
Yeah.
and offer connection when they're really terrifying experiences and moments in time, and harm is happening, and it can get pretty wonky pretty fast. But what a divine practice to hold it all with love and have the right action that we each can have in the moment, connected,
Yeah.
soul to soul connected, human to human connected.
Yeah, absolutely. And the social worker in me wants to say, well, and the social justice is just real, right? And I
Oh,
do
yeah.
not want to at all imply that it's not real, or that we shouldn't care, or that we shouldn't be upset. Like, that it just is bad. It just is. And I think what's so helpful about having that other perspective is that and I'm assuming you do too, I've done a lot of work with trauma and with the neurobiological realities that go along with trauma. And so I think what happens for a lot of us when we get really caught up in being upset about social justice issues or whatever, the trauma of the world, is that we just go into a trauma response, which is really natural. And ultimately, we can't be the most helpful that we came to be if we're in a chronic trauma response.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, like, that other perspective that the spirit world gave isn't about, for me, it's not about denying the reality that it's bad. Like, what I'm upset about is truly upsetting. And at the same time, it gives me a way of helping my nervous system to regulate and to come back into a state, like the parasympathetic nervous system as opposed to the sympathetic nervous system, so that and I'm speaking about myself, but I think it's true for a lot of us, is when we regulate our nervous system, our bodies can come into this healing state of being, and then we can be co-regulators for others, right? We can be a presence that can help others to feel okay as we navigate whatever it is that we're navigating. And if I'm freaked out and just having a panic attack, I cannot be present for my clients, for example, or my children or my friends or anybody in a way that's actually going to be helpful. Yeah. So
well put. And I feel this very strong call to encourage the emotional maturity and the spiritual maturity that it takes to do what you're describing.
yeah, easier said than done a lot of the time. Yeah.
Well, a call sometimes is only a call to practice and not a call to perfection. I imagine that this could be true for you. I'm curious if it is, but the vulnerability of giving it our best shot is really worth it.
Yeah. I feel like there's no other real option for me, at least. What else would I do? Yeah.
Yeah. This has been an amazing conversation, Martha. I really appreciate all of your wisdom and the way that you're willing to speak about your life experiences so openly.
I appreciate your listening. You're an amazing presence and listener.
Thank you. Is there more that you would like to add, either something we have not talked about or something that you want to elaborate on a little further?
I could say just a little bit for anybody who's interested about, I can give a brief little bit about the astrology of this moment that I think is really relevant to what we're just talking about, if that's okay.
Yes.
So this is June 2023 when we're recording this. And for anyone who is interested in astrology, or maybe you already know this if you really know astrology really well, is that Pluto is currently squaring the nodes of the moon. And so in a nutshell, and it will exactly square the nodes of the moon in the middle of July 2023. And for Pluto to be squaring the nodes of the moon in general it's like a major turning point, choice point collectively on a deep karmic level. And that's what I'm feeling super strongly in myself, in the world, and specifically I feel it as a choice point around exactly what you're just saying. It's like I feel so much coming up around the effects of patriarchy and the effects of the trauma that has been induced over, however many eons on this planet. And I feel like a lot of us are feeling a call to drastically shift our karmic patterns around that in ourselves internally, and then in our world, in our communities, and in the whole planet as a collective. And astrologically, that is absolutely accurate. I mean, the astrology definitely reflects that being what this moment is. And what I've been feeling personally and collectively is it is often so hard and often really, really easy to get, again, very upset. I mean, I was naming just now one of the sort of more political examples of that for myself, but on a personal level, also a lot has been coming up for me in a lot of other ways. And so I can just name for myself that there have been moments, just even the last few weeks, where I absolutely would have justifiably gotten very angry, upset. I could have reacted in ways that were coming from that place. And I feel like astrologically, this is just intensifying, because I think we do have a moment right now. We have this in every moment, but especially now, we have this moment to choose to meet this opportunity for this radical shift, either by getting really thrown off and caught up in those really difficult feelings, which might happen just kind of even for a moment, because we're human and it's hard to not sometimes feel that way. And what I keep getting brought back to is what you were saying a minute ago, which is I keep getting told, just come back to love. Come back to love. come back to love. Like that is
Yeah.
our answer. That is where we can find the ability to navigate this time. And, if we are feeling called to make these radical shifts in ourselves and in the world, I feel like that has to be, or for me at least, that is the one mantra that I keep having is come back to love, come back. Like there's nothing incorrect about love, right? It can't go wrong, I feel like, in that. And anyway, I just feel called to
Mhm.
say that.
I love what you just said. I love what you just said, that there is nothing incorrect about
Mm,
love. That is so meaningful in so many different ways. And I completely agree.
thank you.
Where can everyone find you, Martha? How do you like people to? You mentioned a YouTube channel, and I know there are some books. And how do you want people to discover more about you and connect with you?
Yeah, the easiest, simplest way is to go to my website, which is livingtheonelight.com. Everything I do is living the one light. So, like, my first book is called Living the One Light, which is on Amazon. My YouTube channel is Living the One Light. My website is Living the One Light. My email is livingtheonelight@gmail.com. Pretty much put in Living the One Light anywhere on Facebook, on Instagram, wherever, and you'll find me. But yeah, my website has a link to I have online courses. I have this free symposium that I've been doing this whole month that'll be available for free indefinitely. That's a whole other topic, but I have one-on-one sessions. I have, mentoring. I have lots and lots and lots of, I have a membership. I have healing circles that I do. I have a goddess series that I lead that, a lot. I have a
Mm.
lot available, and but it's all there on my website, livingtheonelight.com.
I love how you make it so easy for us to find you. Thank you for sharing your light. Thank you for connecting with the oneness of all and being such a bright light of oneness.
Hmm. Well, same. I witnessed that in you too. Thank
Mm. Thank you.
you.
Thank you so much for listening. It has been a great joy to have your presence here in this podcast. I welcome you to celebrate the joy and wisdom in your life exactly as it is. And I welcome you to feel loved, fully loved, exactly as you are. www.rainelizabeth.org.